Each of the states had its own economic policy, had its own tax policy, had its own import-export policy. When they signed the Constitution, they abdicated the right to coin money, to impose tariffs on imports from other states. They all adopted what, well, in European politics these days, is called monetary unification. Do you know why the euro is under crisis today? Well, you don't have to rely on my testimony. I teach at the University of Texas in Austin, and visiting last week was Joschka Fischer, who used to be the German foreign minister. And he was talking about this, and he said, and he's not the only one who said this, lots of people are saying this, the problem of the Eurozone is that there is monetary unification, but there is not fiscal unification. And so there's a single currency, but you've got 17 different countries with 17 different tax policies and spending policies. And some of them run up these big deficits that put strains on the entire euro. And so the other countries that rely on the euro feel obliged to come in and bail out the countries that are under such strain. And I was about to say, this was a luncheon, I was about to say, you know, maybe the experience of the United States could have something to teach the Eurozone countries. Because, you know, the United States adopted monetary unification with the adoption of the Constitution, but didn't have fiscal unification. In fact, still doesn't. There are 50 states that have their own taxing policies. They have their own spending policies. But something prevented me from saying, you know, it worked out okay for the United States. And do you know what stopped me from saying it worked out okay for the United States? Oh, first of all, one doesn't want to come across appearing smug. But there's a second reason. You know what the second reason is? 2 words. Actually, closely related to the 2 words of magic that you guessed, occurred simultaneously. The Legal Tender Act was passed during what period of American history? The Civil War. So the U.S. model of federalism, we seem to have worked things out by now, but there was this big crisis of the Civil War where, you know, half the country knocked heads very badly with the other half of the country to figure out, well, how unified is this country after all? Okay, from 1789 until the Civil War, the United States operated on a monetary system that looked like this. The federal government coined money, gold and silver coins. The federal government did not print money. Paper money was used, but paper money was printed by private banks. Now, private banks? Would you accept money issued by a private bank? Let me ask. Where I teach at the University of Texas in Austin, and there are these things called Bevo bucks. Bevo is the mascot of UT. And Bevo bucks are issued by merchants who are right near the university. And they're sort of like coupons. They're an effort to attract business, get people to come in. This is sort of a private currency. And you can use them at participating merchants. And if you go very far away from campus, if you leave Texas, if you come to Illinois, nobody's going to take them. Well, that's exactly what banknotes were like. If you happened to be in New York and somebody handed you, let's say, a $5 bill issued by a Bank of New York, you'd probably take it. Wait, why do people use money at all? What is money? What's the point of using money? Why do you use money? You walk around with sometimes currency in your pocket. And nowadays, of course, most money is plastic. Most money is just digital bits on somebody's computer. But what's the point of money? Money has a couple of different purposes. Number one, it is sort of a marker of value. How much is your labor worth? Let's say you make $10, $15 an hour. An hour of your time is worth $15. It could be that you produce something. So maybe you're an artist and you sell your paintings for $500. Okay? That's a marker of how much this is worth. But money is also primarily a medium of exchange. If you're an artist and you paint a picture, well, you can't eat your picture, and you do want to eat. So you take your picture and you go to the local pizza store. And the pizza owner says, I'm not an art. I'm not an art. I'm not interested in art, and besides, how many pizzas do you want anyway? No, so you can't trade your art for a pizza directly, but you could sell your art to somebody who wants to buy it, and that person will have something that somebody else wants, that somebody else wants, that somebody else wants, and eventually you'll work your way around to get your pizza. Money is to make that happen. So, the reason there is money is that people don't want to have to be reliant on barter. And so you will accept private money as long as, oh, let me ask you that. What if you looked at that dollar bill and suppose $20 bill. Let's just suppose that tomorrow night, in the dark of night, when the rest of the country was asleep, Congress met and it said, we repeal legal tender laws. So, this stuff, this legal tender formula doesn't work anymore. Okay? So, all of a sudden, the magic has disappeared. If you walk into the pizza store the next day, will you still get your pizza? What do you think? Yeah, you'll get your pizza. Why will you get your pizza? Exactly, because the pizza guy with the 20 can pay his supplier. If the pizza guy thinks that somebody else will take the money, he'll be happy to take the money because he wants your business. Okay? I mean, after all, why do people buy real estate? They buy real estate partly because they want a place to live, but they also buy it for speculative purposes. Why do people buy stock? Facebook's going to have an IPO soon, and people are going to buy Facebook stock. Why do they do it? For the dividends? It's not going to pay any dividends. Tech stocks usually don't pay dividends. Apple started paying dividends, but the tradition is it doesn't pay dividends. People buy things as speculations because they think somebody else will pay them more in the future. It's sometimes unkindly called the greater fool theory. That I buy it because there's a greater fool out there than I. And that person will pay me for it. This is how money works. If people think that they can use that money and pay somebody else, they'll take your money. Now, in the days before legal tender, money traded at a discount. If you were across the street from the issuing bank, you get face value. If you were $50 from the issuing bank, you might have to discount it 5%. If you were 3 states over, you might only get the equivalent of 50 cents on the dollar because of the uncertainties of getting to the bank and getting the thing cash and convert it into something you can use. Legal tender was designed to obviate that, to make everybody have to play according to the same rules. Even then, it didn't work. It didn't work in the following sense. For 15 years after the passage of the Legal Tender Act, the United States had a dual currency system. There were 2 kinds of dollars. There were paper dollars, and they were noteworthy for the green ink that they were printed in. And this gave rise to the slang term for the dollar, which is what? The greenback. Okay? It's still called the greenbacks, but in the Civil War, greenbacks had a specific meaning. Those paper dollars printed in green ink. There were also paper dollars that were backed by gold that you could actually take to the Treasury and convert to gold. They were printed in gold ink. How many of you in this room remember, wait a minute, I got to get my prop once again, on the front just above Andrew Jackson's head it says Federal Reserve Note. Does anybody in the room remember when there was another kind of note? You're nodding your head, sir. What were they called? Bill? Silver certificates. There were silver certificates. I happen to have one because a friend found it in the back drawer of her father's desk in Chicago not that long ago. And her father died 30 years ago. and nobody cleaned out the desk. And it says on that silver certificate, like on all silver certificates, if you took this to the local branch of the Federal Reserve, you could trade it in for the equivalent amount in silver. Those haven't been in circulation since the 1970s. Now it's all paper. Okay. Through the Civil War, the United States was on this dual currency, gold dollars and paper dollars. And the paper dollars, even though Congress said they're legal tender, you have to take them, people didn't trust them. And so people would offer something for sale. This horse is for sale. You can pay me $100 for this horse if you give me a gold dollar. If you give me those damn greenbacks, it's going to cost you $125. And that's basically, and the difference between the gold dollars and the paper dollars fluctuated over the course of the Civil War. Now, it was when I was studying this that I finally had the answer to a question that had puzzled me for years when I studied the Civil War. Any of you who've studied the Civil War, if you know anything about the major battles of the Civil War, one of the things that you will find very interesting is why the battles were frequently wrongly reported. It would be reported that one side had won the battle, and then the battle would continue for some hours more, and actually the other side won the battle. And I thought, all this, why don't they simply wait till the battle's over and see who won? It's like reporting who's going to win a basketball game on the basis of the score in the second quarter. Well, nobody would be so foolish as to do that today. So why did reporters make this foolish error? Now, one of the things that I caution my students against again and again is never assume that the people you're studying in history were more foolish than you are. And this because, in the first place, they're usually not. You know, no generation, as far as I can tell, is more foolish or less foolish than any other generation. If they look foolish to you, you haven't figured out what they were thinking. Do you know what the answer to this question as to why the battles kept getting wrongly reported prematurely? Well, the answer is it has everything to do with this legal tender note and the speculative market that existed between paper dollars and gold dollars. Every time the Union won a battle, the value of the paper dollars went up because it looked like the government was going to be able to redeem them. Every time the Union lost a battle, the value of the paper dollars would go down compared to gold. Well, speculators would pay huge money to figure out what was going to happen. And if you got half an hour start on everybody else, this could be worth lots and lots of money. I will digress briefly to tell you about an experience I had a month ago. A month ago? 2 months ago now, almost. Every year in Davos, Switzerland, there is a conference of sort of leading figures in the world economy. And I was there this year, and it was at the height of the Euro crisis. And there were the prime ministers and chancellors and foreign ministers and treasury ministers and all the leading players were there. And they would come up before the group, and every afternoon there were various kinds of conference sessions, kind of like an academic conference during the day, but the heavy hitters would show up late in the afternoon. And so Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, was there. And she was kind of the opening speaker, and she lectured the other European countries on what they needed to do to get their house in order. And then the next day, representatives of the southern European countries, the charmingly called pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, they rebutted. Said, no, it's not our problem, so on. Well, in the audience were the managers of various investment funds, hedge funds, mutual funds, and so on.